2001. And not only did they decriminalize all drugs, say if you're an adult you can use any drug you want, they said you can have up to 10 days supply on your person and not get arrested. Of course, 10 days supply to you would be different than 10 days supply to me, which would be different than 10 days supply to you. So virtually nobody gets arrested for drug violations over there. And you'd think that would cause chaos. Well, exactly the opposite has happened. And we got 8 years to prove it. A study was just done on it that shows drug use in every category, age category, has gone down, especially among the young people. For children from 13 to 15 years old, drug use has declined by 25%. And for young people from 16 to 19 years old, it is down 22%. And some other great things have happened. You know, there's still, as I say, when you decriminalize, you're only decriminalizing for the user, so all these other things are still criminal activities. There's still no regulation over what the drugs are, how they're made. They're still taking this heroin that could be deadly to them. But because the heroin users are no longer treated as criminals, because now they're treated as people with a health problem, they're not afraid to bring their friends forward when they're overdosing. And they've cut overdose deaths by 52%. Think of all the lives they're saving. How about these terrible blood-borne diseases, HIV, AIDS, hepatitis? New cases of HIV in Portugal, reported by intravenous drug users, are down 71% since they decriminalized. And by the way, new cases of HIV reported by the rest of the community, non-drug users, is exactly the same level as it ever was. So this stuff seems to work. Mexico decriminalized all drugs last year, small amounts of all drugs, on October 21st last year. And they said they did it to stop police corruption. I'm sorry, I don't have a picture. Because the police were arresting people for tiny little amounts of drugs and then saying, you know, grease my palm a little and I'll let you go. So Mexico has said to stop that, they're just going to decriminalize small amounts of drugs. I think they're going to find a lot of other good things happen from this decriminalization. But 3 days after Mexico decriminalized all drugs, Argentina, which is misspelled there, the Argentina Supreme Court ruled it's unconstitutional to arrest anybody for what they put in their body. And less than a month after that, Colombia made exactly, the Supreme Court made exactly the same ruling. And you might not know it, but on January 1st of this year, the Czech Republic decriminalized all drugs. These countries are changing regularly, very quickly. Let's talk about how many people we imprison in the United States. We're such a punitive nation. You know, all Western European countries imprison their population at or below 150 people per 100,000. Anyone know what we do in the United States? Well, I guess you would, because you know it. 1,009 per 100,000. That means that 1 out of every 100 people in the United States is sitting in a jail or prison right now. Extraordinary. Either we have the most vile, vicious people in the world in my country, or there's something wrong with what we're doing there. What are they there for? This will show you. This is the number of people in our federal system, but it shows on a per capita basis roughly the same thing as happening in our state system. 1970, at the beginning of the war, we had a little over 3,000 people there for nonviolent drug offenses. We had another 17,000 there for violent crimes, for child molestation, for all sorts of nasty things. In the 40 years of the war on drugs, we've increased the number of people in our federal prisons for violent crimes by about 300%. But in the same time, we've increased the number of people in our federal prisons for non-violent drug offenses by 2,558%. That's the reason our prisons are bursting at the seams. That's the reason we've been building prisons so fast, and now we can't even afford to build them anymore because every state is in deficit spending. So what has happened, at least 3 states that I know of already, and California is talking about doing it, but Arizona, Alabama, and Virginia have already started early release of prisoners so they can make room for these nonviolent drug offenders we're sticking in there. And who are they releasing early? Well, they can't release the people in there for nonviolent drug offenses because they're all in under mandatory minimum sentences. So they're letting the violent criminals go. At some point, this becomes insanity. And this is a chart showing the countries that have this purple part running down this side is the number of crimes committed per 1,000 population, and everything on the right is the number of people imprisoned in each of these countries per 100,000 population. And all these countries that are in green are countries where they have already decriminalized drugs to some extent. And as I say, this is happening so fast I can't even keep up with it. Czech Republic, I haven't even made green yet. But look at this, and the question becomes, what does imprisoning people for nonviolent drug offenses have to do with reducing crime? When you look at this, apparently it's nothing at all. Who uses and sells drugs in the United States? If you look at our federal household survey, it's done every year, and it tells you, and it says that 72% of those folks look just like me. Basically a bunch of white guys. Black folks are only 13.5% of the problem there, selling or using drugs, which is just about the population. But now, who gets arrested? 37% of all those arrested in my country for drug violations are black folks. Who goes to prison? 60% of all the people in state prisons for drug felonies are black folks. 81% of the people in our federal system for drug violations are black folks. They're only 13% of the problem, guys. Blacks are now serving an average of 6 years in prison for exactly the same drug crimes that whites are serving an average of 4 years in prison. And of those white people convicted of a drug violation, 33% of them will get sentenced to prison, while 51% of the blacks will be sentenced to prison. Now, I don't think you have this kind of racism here, but I'm sure you have a certain class issue here, and an issue that's being picked up where immigrants to your country are receiving more of these sentences than non-immigrants. So the problem with prohibition is this is what it ends up at eventually. The poor, the people that have not, they're the ones that are going to get the worst of the case. Even the FBI has taken notice of this. 5 years ago, they came out in their uniform crime report with this statement. I think it's one of the saddest statements I ever saw in my life. They're saying that a young couple giving birth to a black male baby then, 5 years ago, and it's worse today, had an expectation of 1 in 3 that child would spend time in prison. 1 in 3? If we only changed one word in that sentence, if we changed black male baby to white male baby, we would have ended the war on drugs 30 years ago. Because the people in power would not stand for that kind of thing. You know, we talked about how important the right to vote is in our democratic country there in the United States, and it's always always made very clear that thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people have died